This is Grace Notes. I'm Alan Button. Our guest today is Andy Anderson. Andy is a World War II veteran and a longtime resident now of North Carolina, having retired from the Postal Service in 1985. Andy, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
My pleasure.
Andy has identified some music that is special to him that predates me a bit.
Well, my age predates a lot of people nowadays.
Tell us what your earliest political recollection was. Give us some history here.
Well, one of my first serious recollections was the inauguration of Herbert Hoover as president. We lived in the country, and I can remember my dad using a wagon to take my mother and my two older sisters and I to the neighbors who had a radio, so we could listen to it on the radio. But I couldn't understand how that noise was coming out of that little black box. That was my first association with the radio.
This was in Central Illinois?
Central Illinois.
What did your father do for a living?
At that period of time, he was a farmer.
Did you grow up through your high school years on the farm?
I grew up and lived on the farm till I was in the 6th grade. And then my dad lost the farm and the whole works, and we moved into a little village, and I lived there through high school.
You say your dad lost the farm. Was that a consequence of the Depression?
Depression.
The economic
situation? He wasn't the only one. It was like a virus all around the country.
Did you and your sisters do work on the farm yourself? Farms?
I started working by the time I was 9 or 10. I was using teams of horses in the fields and that sort of thing. And I was a full-time farmhand by the time I was 12 years old. Barefooted, but still a farmhand.
What did your dad do after the...
After we lost all their equipment and all that sort of stuff, he worked as a laborer wherever he could find work.
And you said you had moved into the village? Is that what you said?
There was a little village named Oakford, still there today. At that time it was about 300, 350. It's about 300 today. And I grew up through high school living in that village. At
some point, I gather you got drafted. Is that right?
I got my notice to report on my 20th birthday, and I reported the next month.
So that would have been 1942.
42, I got the notice, and I reported in January of 43.
Well, tell you what, I'd like to come back to your experience in the war, but before we do that, let's talk about this first song that you've identified, because it predates the war a little bit, Stardust by Hoagy Carmichael. Tell us about it.
It was a popular song even when... before I started high school. When I was in school, I was an athlete, and I can remember very well the coach when I was a sophomore telling me that I'd be a better basketball player if I learned how to dance and roller skate. Well, roller skating was not a problem, but dancing was a little bit different. But it did improve my basketball playing. Big bands and swing bands were very prominent in that time frame, and this was a song that all of them played. And it became almost a favorite overnight with me. And it's still one of my favorite songs.
And this is a song that you would hear on the radio?
On the radio. A lot of local communities had dances like on the weekend, and all the little bands and the combos and so forth, all those groups, somewhere in their set of music, they'd play Stardust. It was played everywhere you went. So it was very easy for me to fall in love with the song.
Well, it's a classic instrumental. Let's hear the song, Stardust, by Hoagy Carmichael, performed by Artie Shaw and his orchestra. That was Stardust by Hoagy Carmichael, performed by Artie Shaw and his orchestra. Andy, I'd like to pick up with where we left off just before that song. You were saying that you were drafted in 1942 and you were inducted in January of 1943.
Yes.
Where were you inducted, and then where did you go?
I was inducted in Illinois. I reported to Scott Field, which was in southern Illinois. And from there, I went to Camp Hood, Texas for 13 weeks. And then I went to a holding camp in Pennsylvania for a few weeks, and then on to Newport News, Virginia, and then boarded a boat and went to Casablanca, North Africa. And I wound up with the 1st Division in Sicily in July of 1943.
Most of us, I think, when we hear Casablanca, think about the Humphrey Bogart movie. Was Casablanca anything like what you see in the movie?
We got off the boat. They trucked us out to this camp out in the desert about 20 miles out. So the guys used to get on that train and go into Casablanca. And the MPs in Casablanca had a rule. If you caught in Casablanca after dark, you automatically went to the brig. I went one time. I spent a couple hours, got on the train, went back to camp.
You didn't hang around to hear Sam play the piano?
No.
How long were you in North Africa?
Just a few weeks. The shooting had stopped by the time we got there, and we wondered why we were there. And then one of the guys got a hold of a copy of the Stars and Stripes, and the headline on the Stars and Stripes, Allied Forces Invade Sicily. So we knew we were going to Sicily, so that's where I wound up, and that's how I became a member of the Big Red One. One of the famous infantry divisions.
How'd the Big Red One get its name?
Well, the way I understand it, that World War I, they didn't have a significant patch, and some guy just pulled out some white material and put the one figure in blood on that material, and it became the insignia.
But as you say, the Big Red One became very well known.
It's very well known.
In
fact,
infantry.
Right now we have troops in 2 or 3 different places in conflict right now.
Well, you then went to Sicily. How long were you there?
They invaded Sicily on the 10th of July, and the campaign ended on the 16th of August. And after that, we were relieved, and we left Sicily about the middle of October. We shipped out of Augusta, Sicily, and landed in Liverpool, England. And they transferred us to Dorset County and got to England the first week in November to train for the landing.
How long were you there?
Well, we left Dorset County about the 1st of May, 1944, moved to another camp, and then they took us to the port where we got on the ships for the landing.
You say the landing, and of course you're talking about D-Day.
D-Day. We got on the boat about the first day of June, 44. We did sail out on the night of the 5th for the landing on the 6th, and we made the landing on the 6th of June. We knew we were going to hit the beach somewhere, but we had no idea where it was. We didn't know what the names of the beaches were until we got on the boat, and they had a thing set up on the boat where it was a picture of what they thought the beach was going to be like. We were told then that we were going to be on the easy red sector of Omaha Beach.
You said Omaha Beach?
Yes.
Can you tell us about the battle?
I remember we got up about 4:30 in the morning, and we got a meal, and we got our last instructions. And we circled around the water for about an hour and a half or 2 hours. But in the meantime, the shelling had started. The planes had gone over. About an hour before we landed, it was terrific naval fire. We circled around out in the water, and the water was rough. And a lot of our guys got seasick and heaved all over all the equipment and everybody, and it was kind of a mess. But as soon as we headed in for the landing, we started to draw terrific small arms artillery and mortar fire. And as soon as that ramp went down for us to get off the boat, we started suffering casualties. And we got off in the water about waist to chest deep, and we had all that equipment and all that sort of stuff, and it was just like wading in snow trying to get out of the water. Guys were getting hit with machine gun bullets, and some guys were able to drag other guys out and so forth. There was kind of a sandbar about halfway in from where we landed and the actual beach. Our first objective was to get to that sandbar, catch our breath, and then go on the rest of the way to the beach area, and that's what we did.
How long were you engaged?
Well, from the time we got off the boat in the water till we get up to the top of the hill, it's the bluff, I call it, was probably about 2 hours, but it seemed like forever, and casualties were staggering.
When were you able to sleep after you landed?
I think that first night, see, we got out of the beach area and got into the hedgerows.
And it was very early in the morning when you landed.
My wave, I was in the second wave. I think the first wave was 10 minutes till 7, and our wave was to go in at 7 o'clock. And it was after 9:30 by the time we got off the beach up to the bluff area, I called it. That was the deadliest time.
And by that point, the enemy had retreated?
We had been able to make holes in the fortifications and so forth, and and we had people scattered all over the beach area. And the first little town for us was Colville, Samir, which was about 1,800 yards in off the beach. And we had people in the town that evening, and we had people all in the surrounding area parallel to that. And they kept landing people, so we knew all during the night that everybody was going to have to move in the morning. So everybody attacked the next morning in all the directions to get it through Colville and expand the beach area, which we did.
Have you been back to Normandy since then?
I've been back 5 times. I went back in '69 on the 25th anniversary and the 50th anniversary as a part of the Big Red One group for ceremonial purposes. And the other 3 times I went back for my own benefit and took members of the family.
Where did you go from Normandy?
There was a highway that went to Liège from Mons. They had a big surrender at Mons. We took about 20,000 prisoners, and we thought we'd captured half the German army. But then we went right up that main highway from Mons to Namur, Liège, on toward Aachen. At that point in time, our Air Force controlled all the air. Every time the Germans moved in daylight, they were shooting the tar out of them and staying on the roads and everything. When they come out of the fields and the forest, we captured a lot of prisoners. Sure, we had skirmishes, small arms fire skirmishes, but there was no big battles until we got to the Siegfried Line.
And the Siegfried Line was where?
On the German border. It was fixed fortifications, bunkers, and that sort of thing, which they had prepared for before they ever went into World War II. The Germans had the Siegfried Line, the French had the Maginot Line.
And the campaign ran from July through September?
In that period of time where we made big jumps. Sometimes we'd go 8-10 miles a day, maybe the next day we'd go 30 or 40 miles.
Where did you go after September?
Our big objective was Aachen. Of course, we ran out of supplies.
Aachen is in what country?
Germany. Hitler had made the statement no big city would ever fall to the Allies. And our objective was to take Aachen. And we surrounded it on the 17th or 18th or 19th of October. And the 26th Infantry started clearing the town house to house a day or so after that. And it took them about 7 days, and then the Germans surrendered the city.
And from there you went where?
Went to the Hurtgen Forest, they call it. That was another bloodbath. There was 7 or 8 outfits that were involved in Hurtgen Forest, and they all got hurt badly. We were pulled out of the Hurtgen Forest in the early part of December, and we were headed for a rest camp in Verviers, Belgium. They had set up an area, Tent City, we called it, where every unit could go there, and you got new equipment, you take a shower, get new clothing and all that sort of stuff. But we never really got established because the Germans broke through on the 16th of December for the Ardennes. And they moved us immediately from that area to another area, what we called Elsenborn Ridge in Belgium. And we were in the St. Vis and Weems and some other small towns. And we were there from about the 17th of December till sometime in January.
So you spent Christmas of 1944 in Belgium.
In Belgium.
Christmas of 1943, you were in England.
In England. The weather was decent. For England, we didn't see much sun, but we weren't getting shot at either. The best part is not only we got a hot turkey dinner and so forth, but the best part was the sun came out in Belgium. So when the sun came out, our Air Force could work, and they started blistering the Germans.
You've identified another song for us, Andy, that ties right in with Christmas. I'll Be Home for Christmas. Tell us about it.
Most of the GIs, they all talked about the movie. One of the last movies they'd seen was Holiday Inn. Well, White Christmas came out in that movie, and also the song we're talking about.
And we're talking Bing Crosby here.
Bing Crosby. All the GIs knew about Bing Crosby. They also knew about Frank Sinatra. They hated Sinatra because he was 4F. He'd have to serve, but that's a story, another story. But anyway, all the GIs, all they talked about, they either talked about their folks, their wives, or their girlfriends, or they wanted to go home for Christmas. And that song fit right in. That was something that everybody dreamed of. When's this thing going to be over, and when am I going home?
They just wanted to be home for Christmas.
Yeah, because 95% of the guys that I fought with, but all the replacements coming in, biggest share of them were draftees. It always used to be a big deal in the Big Red One. The RAs, regular Army, and the DDs, the damn draftees. But we all bled the same red blood.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of dreaming of being home for Christmas, that's the last line in the song. I'll be home for Christmas, if only in my dreams. A lot of dreaming of that, I imagine, going on in 1943 and 1944. Well, let's hear the song, I'll Be Home for Christmas, by Bing Crosby.
I'll be home.
That was I'll Be Home for Christmas by Bing Crosby. This is Grace Notes, and our guest today is Andy Anderson. Andy, by the way, in 2014 was awarded the Legion of Honor medal by the French, a medal actually established originally by Napoleon, as I understand it. Tell us about your World War II experience as it related to family, particularly that special lady.
Well, I mentioned earlier that I'd gone through Pennsylvania before I went to North Africa. Well, 2 days before I shipped out, I met this young lady, and we were attracted to each other, and we kept in touch all of those months that I was gone, and we got together when I got back, and later we got married and lived together 46 and a half years. Charming lady, beautiful lady, and great nurse.
You have brought into the studio today a picture that, as I understand it, you carried with you.
She sent me this. The picture was sent to me in January of 1944 in England. And I kept that picture with me or on my body or in my equipment somewhere all those days, even on landing at Normandy, all the parade through France, Luxembourg, Belgium, Germany, Czechoslovakia, and home with me. And I still have that picture yet today. And I can remember I carried it in my boots sometimes. Sometimes I had an extra first aid packet on my web belt that I carried, and I had a little packet. I slip it in there, but I always made sure it was somewhere around.
Your wife's name was Josephine.
Josephine.
Did you and Josephine correspond while you were...
We corresponded as much as possible. She corresponded more than I did because we weren't always in a position where you could sit down and write letters, and we corresponded all the 28 months I was gone.
Did you get mail regularly?
Oh, my mail finally caught up with me after I had gone from Camp Hood, Texas, to all these other places and wound up in Sicily. And from that period of time, and when I left Camp Hood, was about May the 1st of 43 until the war ended in Sicily in August of 43. I got all that mail humped in one big lot. And I can remember one thing. One of my sisters had sent me a cake, and that cake had followed me the whole route. The box was nothing except a mashed up catastrophe, I thought. Because there was still crumbs of that cake in there. And the guys in my squad and I ate every one of those crumbs.
Josephine wrote you regularly, as I understand it, and she began to wonder, I suppose,
from the time I last saw her was about the 1st of June of 43, and by the time I got the mail was in September, October of 43. A lot of time had gone through, and she wrote to me, and that sort of thing, and that mail was forwarded, and in one of those letters that she's, when I finally got all the mail, said, I've been writing frequently, and if you don't respond, I'm going to stop writing. So,
did you write back to her in a hurry?
Oh, yeah.
How did the two of you happen to decide to move to North Carolina?
Well, the year before I retired, I said, you've been a kind mate in all of my travels and everything. I'm going to grant you the right to pick a retirement place when we get ready to retire. She was from Pennsylvania and I was from Illinois. Both, we have severe winters, and we knew we were not interested in going back to either one of those places. So Pinehurst was one of the first places we looked, and she fell in love with the place on the first day we were there. We came here in 79 over Thanksgiving weekend. We were here 4 days, and the temperature was either 70 or near 70 each one of the 4 days. And she said, Andy, this is it. From the fact that it was surrounded by golf courses, didn't hurt me a bit, so I was tickled.
And Joe died in 1996?
She died in April of 96.
You mentioned that you had gone back to Normandy with family, I think you said. Did Joe ever go back with you?
She went with me on the 25th and the 50th, and she enjoyed tremendously those trips. But when I decided to go in 2010, just for my own benefit, and a couple of my nieces and nephews were history teachers in high school. So one of them mentioned that they might like to go along. So one of my nieces and her husband went with me. So at that Christmas, they were telling the other ones. So a year or so later, I decided to go back again, and I asked how many of them would like to go with me, and 30 of them went with me in 2013, and some of them couldn't go. So then in 2015, I went back again. I took 9 of them that couldn't go the first time. It was the second time.
What a great thing.
It was great. It was a great deal for all of us.
Sure.
They'd heard me talk about things during the war, and we actually went to some of those places where I'd been. It was a historic tour, and everybody enjoyed it. They still talk about it.
Well, Andy, we've got Veterans Day coming up next week. What are your thoughts on Veterans Day?
I'm in favor of all the things they do on Veterans Day, to remember all the veterans, not just World War II guys, but from all the wars. And I enjoy going to the ceremonies, riding in the parade, and all that sort of thing. And I'm delighted that the people still honor the veterans of our country.
Well, Andy, if we could, let's go back to that third song that you identified. Go back to, I guess, Josephine has maybe something to say about this, or you have something to say about it with respect to Josephine? It's been a long, long time. Is the name of the song.
In 1945, when the war ended, they had decided the Big Red One was going to stay in Germany for the Army of Occupation. So they had to separate the guys that were going to stay in the unit and the people who were going to go. Well, I was in the group that was going to go. I had a choice of 3 places I could be discharged. Jefferson Barracks in St. Louis, Camp Atterbury, which was near Indianapolis. Fort Sheridan was Chicago. Well, in the meantime, Josephine had decided she wanted to be a nurse, and she had gone to nursing school in Chicago. So I said, I'm going to Fort Sheridan. So that was my first active duty when I got to Fort Sheridan, was get in touch with her and meet her. And that's how this third song worked into the equation.
Tell us about the song.
Everywhere I went, even when I was at Fort Sheridan, if you went to the PX or whatever on the jukebox, this song was playing. If you went into a bar on the jukebox, it was playing. If you listened to the radio, it was playing. So it immediately became a big favorite with me. And Jo was, her hospital training was only a few blocks from the Aragon Ballroom. So we used to go there, and she was a big band junkie like me. So it was appropriate that we fall in love with that song, and it worked.
It's a song that became very popular in 1945 as all the soldiers were returning home. The lyrics talk about kiss me once, kiss me twice, and kiss me once again. It's been a long, long time.
It had been a long, long time.
Well, Andy, it's been a treat talking with you. Thank you for being here today.
My pleasure.
Let's go out with the song. It's been a long, long time by Kitty Callan, and we'll have Josephine in mind.